Weird ideal we all love to drive. That is, unless you're behind the wheel of a car that seems like it wants to kill you. Yeah, that's not good. So today we're covering 10 of the most dangerous cars that you can buy. Starting with, Trav and I experienced the unforgiving nature of the Viper firsthand when we drove it halfway across the country. And trust me, it is not the car that you want to be in a hailstorm. The Viper is the most bonkers American production car of all time, with a screaming V10 pumping anywhere from 400 to nearly 650 horsepower to the rear wheels. This snake will bite. If you don't properly respect this monster, you will find yourself thrown to the wolves, or more likely thrown out of the car if it's Gen 1, since there's no roof. Now, the later generations did eventually get the typical slew of driver nannies like ABS and traction control, but even then, it's dangerously easy to find yourself driving beyond your limits when you've got this much power under the hood. But if you're like me and can't help but love this slithery supercar, why not check out this limited edition Ideal T? Remember, it's a limited run, so once they're gone, they're gone. It is amazing what Ultima drivers have managed to do. Despite not having a screaming V10 engine, a tricky race car clutch, and plenty of driver assistance, the Ultima still cracks the top 10 in most deadly cars on the road today. I don't know if it's the wannabe street racers, grandmas who need to get their license revoked or what, but Ultima drivers are involved in a disproportionately high number of fatal car crashes. It's become legendary for all the wrong reasons. Maybe it's for the best that Nissan's going to be phasing out the Ultima by the end of 2025. That said, if you find yourself driving anywhere near one on the road, your best bet is to clear out as far as possible, as quickly as possible. And real quick, you know what won't kill you? Well, liking the vid and subscribing to the channel. So if you're finding this interesting, give the video a like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell. Okay, back to the list. The Porsche Carrera GT is just an absolute stunner. It's a Porsche supercar for the modern age. Breathtaking looks, a magnificent V10, and mind-blowing performance. But it's also got the reputation for being an absolute widowmaker. You see, the Carrera GT doesn't come with any driver's aids, no traction control, ABS, or the like. It's like a wild bull just daring you to try and tame it. Unless you're a magician at clutch control or you're already a professional race car driver, the Carrera GT will bite you in the ass. So, if you ever find yourself behind the wheel of one, remember, you're a mere mortal, and underdriving it and living is way better than overdriving it and losing control. The Ford Explorer, aka Exploder, was one of the deadliest SUVs on the roads in the 90s and early 2000s. A perfect storm of poor engineering and design decisions combined to make the family-friendly Ford Explorer a tragedy just waiting to happen. See, Ford just slapped a full-size passenger SUV on top of its existing truck chassis, which made for a very top-heavy ride. And that meant a strong gust of wind could cause a rollover. And the Firestone tires that came equipped with the Ford Explorer experienced regular failures in which the tread would separate from the tire, oftentimes at highway speed. Once it became clear the Explorer was killing drivers and passengers at a higher rate than anything else on the road, Ford and Firestone blamed each other for the failures, both refusing to take any responsibility for the tragedies their products were causing. It ended a nearly 100-year partnership between the two brands. Now, the modern Explorer is a much safer ride than it was when it was first introduced. But if you see an older model on the road, give those tires a check. If you see Firestone, run. The Charger and Challenger V8 are pure American muscle cars for the modern era, and pretty soon you won't be able to buy one new unless it's an EV or a turbocharged 6. But if you do have one, be careful, because the Challengers have been challenging drivers pretty much since they were introduced. With anywhere from 370 to almost 1,000 horsepower in demon trim, a Dodge V8 heavy muscle car gives you plenty to play with. In fact, for most drivers, it's probably more than enough rope to hang yourself. And yeah, while Mustangs are the muscle car everyone makes fun of for pulling out at meets, it turns out the Challenger and Charger have it beat when it comes to fatal accidents. Maybe too many drivers think they're towing a bank vault through the streets of Brazil. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be too surprised. I mean, if you're willing to pay $1,000 down and take an 8-year loan with 20% interest, I guess you're willing to take some risks. Porsche's creme de la creme from the 70s and 80s was a true beast and rightfully earned the fear and respect that gave it its nickname, the Widowmaker. Back in the era of disco and excess, Porsche decided to unleash a turbocharged version of their beloved 911. It would be the first 911 Turbo ever. The 930-911 Turbo packed a punch with its rear-mounted 3-liter flat-six engine, complete with a massive turbocharger. This setup meant serious power, but it also came with a big catch: lag. The lag was so pronounced it caught most drivers unaware. When the turbo finally kicked in, it felt like being catapulted into warp speed, right into a wall. Combine that with the 911 rear engine layout, tricky handling, and twitchy tendencies, and you've got a recipe for disaster in the wrong hands. The 930 Turbo demanded respect, precision, and nerves of steel to tame its wild spirit. Now, usually dangerous and deadly rides are a result of too much power and too little driver skill. For the Cobalt and G5, it was lacking in engineering skill. It all came down to the ignition lock. If you had your keys on a keyring with any weight on it, say due to something like, I don't know, other keys, well, that could make the keys straight up fall out of the ignition in your Cobalt or G5, meaning all of a sudden you didn't have power steering, limited brake and gearing controls, and to top it all off, it also turned off the airbags. Now, all of the Cobalt and G5s affected should have been recalled and corrected, but if you got one in your driveway or are considering picking one up, make sure you run the VIN just to make sure the recall has been performed. And now it's time for some honorable mentions, or should I say dishonorable mentions. Now, you're not likely to find any of these 3 cars on the road anymore, but if you're at the right car show, or maybe a car museum perhaps, you'll see a Ford Pinto, Pontiac Fiero, or Chevy Corvette, along with a plaque about just how dangerous these cars could be. The Ford Pinto was a subcompact of the 70s. Ford famously, or infamously, put a ton of fuel system components behind the rear axle, meaning if you got rear-ended, your Pinto would turn into a literal fireball. The Pontiac Fiero GM Frankenstein mid-engine 2-seater, designed to be as fuel efficient as possible and constructed almost entirely out of spare parts from other GM products, was an absolute disaster. As efficient as it was, the Fiero liked to catch on on fire. It turns out the engine connecting rods were defective and had a failure rate of up to 40%. In 1984, Fieros were catching on fire at a rate of 20 per month. Last but not least, the Chevy Corvette, the car that was unsafe at any speed. Massive engineering flaws in the suspension and handling made it almost impossible to drive the Corvette safely. Understeer was a constant problem. Ralph Nader's Unsafe at Any Speed book pointed the finger at GM for knowingly creating an unsafe car for the American public. A huge number of crashes and lawsuits led to the creation of the National Traffic Safety Administration. But the number one most dangerous car that you can actually buy today, well, is the Mitsubishi Mirage. And it might be one of the cheapest new cars that you can buy, but it's also one of the deadliest. In a world of larger and larger cars, SUVs, and massively heavy EVs, tiny econo boxes like the Mirage just don't hold up very well. Plus, with sluggish handling and a pitful inline-3 motor running the show, even if you see trouble coming, the Mirage isn't nimble enough to avoid it. So do yourself a favor and pony up a little bit more for something that will boost your life expectancy by a couple of decades. And there you have it, 10 cars most likely to kill ya. Did we miss any big ones? Are there any on this list that you still want despite the risk? Let me know in the comments below. Now, go check out our other vids, like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. And I'm Brad, this is Ideal, and we'll see you next week, and promise me one thing, keep living the ideal lifestyle.